Okay, welcome everybody, welcome to probably one of the first videos I've done on this channel for quite a while. Like, I don't think I've actually done a proper vlog on my channel like this for a long time. But basically what I'm going to be doing in this video is I'm going to be talking to you guys about my whole experience at university at the time I was at UEA. I'm going to be talking about my 3 years, just kind of some stuff that happened, some of the stuff that we covered. I'm going to conclude by talking about like wrapping everything up and talking about my general advice to people towards the very end. So this video will be really useful for people that are looking to go to UEA or any university in particular. It'll be especially useful for computer science students because I will be going over specific information about the stuff that I studied, and in general it will just be a bit of an insight as to just what went on in my life for the last 3 years. So let's get started. I will admit, before going to uni, I was very nervous. I was in the same boat as a lot of people when it comes to uni, because this is the first time I was actually moving away from my parents. I would be sort of living on my own, cooking like by myself. The whole concept of cooking for me was never a problem because I could already cook before I left, and I worked in a couple of different kitchens before I left. I don't know why I say a couple. What I mean is one. I worked in one, like a particular pub kitchen in like a local village where I helped like make the desserts and the starters and stuff, which was actually quite useful. But just in general, I could already cook before beginning. And just staying on my own wasn't too much of a problem. I didn't really have much of an issue with like staying away from people or like my family, for example. That never really bothered me too much. I was very excited to meet like loads of new people, loads of new friends, loads of people on my course, in my flat, and just people in clubs as well. I'm gonna talk about the clubs that I got involved with as well when I went to uni, because that was very exciting. I was thinking a lot about what the workload would look like at uni, because obviously just coming from sixth form, I was used to the amount of work that they would give us at sixth form, and people when they first go to uni, they think, oh god, am I going to be able to handle the workload? Am I going to be able to handle the content that they throw at us? Chances are, if you just come from sixth form or college and it's all still fresh in your mind, you will. This is why students that study, or they've just come from a gap year, they tend to struggle a little bit more when it comes to adapting to the material because it's not as fresh in their minds. And that's why I didn't take a gap year, because I didn't particularly need to. I just wanted to literally just go for it and keep all of that knowledge just fresh in my mind. So I went with that. I knew there would be a lot of really interesting opportunities at the uni. And for example, there was going to be a lot of club nights with people that I met, which was going to be really exciting. A lot of bar events, meeting new people in societies, meeting people in the course, just generally meeting up with people, just as and when it needed to happen, meeting up with people for like coursework and course related stuff. It was all going to be very social, and that's something that I really looked forward to at the very beginning. So overall, as much as it was particularly nervous at the beginning, I was very excited to think about like all the sorts of stuff that was going to go on in terms of uni. I was very excited to think about what sort of stuff I was going to experience and like where we were going to go, because there was a lot of things to do. There always is a lot of stuff to do at uni, as long as you sort of get yourself involved. And I was ready. I was ready to get involved with whatever it was they were going to throw at me. I was just going to do. Now we're going to start with where it all started. First year of uni was amazing. Easily my favourite year out of the 3 years I've had at UEA. Was absolutely fantastic. So if you're curious as to where I stayed in the university village. If you're someone that's going to UEA, I highly recommend the uni village. It's like a 10-minute walk away from the uni, and it's a little bit cheaper. It has an ensuite as well. There's 8 of you in one particular flat. If you're curious, I stayed in Courtyard A, flat 20, room H. So if you're someone that stays there, leave a comment on the video. Very unlikely, but you never know. And it was a really nice place to stay. Massive desk, single bed, really tiny. It wasn't really an ensuite. You could just call it a washroom, because it was a really like tiny room with just a toilet and a really tiny space for the shower with a really thin curtain. The kitchen was nice, very homey, little table for everybody to sit down. And yeah, no, the actual place that I stayed was a really nice space. It was the perfect distance away from campus. So there's a 10-minute walk away. You walk up and you get to the main square where you can access all of the different campus buildings. There was the cafe, there's obviously the square. There's several different cafes. Some of them were owned by the uni, which I would actually end up working for eventually. And some of them were private owned companies. There was obviously like bookshop, there was a laundrette, there was the bar, there was loads of different places on square, and there was a lot of stuff to sort of explore on campus. Meeting new flatmates was definitely an interesting one. I knew that I was going to have to interact and talk to all the people that I moved in with, and it was really easy to do. Like, it's always always really important to make a good first impression with the people that you move in with, because it's kind of useful to get to know all the people in your flat. It turns out that the majority of people in my flat that year, they weren't like particularly social people, really. They were very they kept themselves to themselves, so not a lot of us really enjoyed club nights. I definitely did. I enjoyed going out with a couple of the people from the flat that I was in, which was always really enjoyable. That was good. There was 8 of us at the beginning, but then a couple of people left a little bit later on, which was a bit more disappointing because they were people that I were good friends with, and they just sort of went off to another uni. They went to at the end of the semester, instead of doing computer science, they decided to go to the Norwich Uni of Arts to do an art-related degree, which is a really weird diversion, but up to them. I'm sure they're enjoying it as well. So in terms of the actual things that we studied, so I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about the modules that we did. So the course that I did was called Computer Systems Engineering, and in first year, everybody that does a computer science branch does the same thing. They do the same 6 modules during the year. So there was Programming 1, which was basically talking about Java. Pretty much the whole thing was Java based. Maths for computing, which was things like calculus, complex numbers, probability, combinatorics, stuff like that. Web development, so things like HTML basics, CSS, JavaScript, and then the Flask framework with Python. And then there was also a module called Systems Development, which was more of a focus on working in a team with people and basically managing projects and understanding how to sort of organize and manage projects, everything to do with that sort of aspect of computer science, because it's really important to know how to actually work with people in a team and how to communicate effectively and manage projects. Then there was database management, which was basically covering the basics of databases and SQL, which was very useful. And then there was also computing principles, which was more stuff to do with like the low end of computer science, the architecture. So, well, not really the architecture, more like low-level theory, so set theory, graph theory, functions, Boolean logic, Boolean algebra, discrete maths, all sorts of things like that were involved in that particular module, which was it wasn't a particularly fun module to do. It was quite tedious, but it was good if you were very sort of left-brained, which I am. So Programming 1 and Maths for Computing were both year-long modules. Web dev and systems development were both for the first semester, so everything was done in the first semester. Then the databases and computing principles modules were the second semester, and then at the end of the year we had exams for each of those modules. I think it was 1 or 2 exams each. I think it was 1 exam per module, so that was okay. And yeah, as I said, a huge aspect of uni was once you've met like loads of people in your course, in your accommodation, and potentially in neighbouring flats, you could start going out with people, and it was really enjoyable to experience clubbing at the uni, and not just in uni but also in the town centre as well. That was a really satisfying experience, just for the first time experiencing the whole social aspect of clubbing and getting drunk and getting hangovers. That was less fun. Luckily I didn't really suffer from hangovers as much, but no, it was one of those things that I recommend everybody at least trying at least once. Even if you're someone that's a bit quieter and doesn't enjoy that sort of thing, just trying it at least once to get involved with people in uni is so satisfying, because it's so easy to make friends on nights out as well. But yeah, so the first semester was definitely really enjoyable. The whole concept of, as I've said, settling in, getting involved with what was going on in the timetables of the lectures, the seminars and the lab sessions. If you do computer science, you have to go to the IT labs to get involved with the programming side of things and whatever else the module requires of you. That was all really well balanced, and we had basically something going on every day except for one day during the week, and obviously we had the weekends free for ourselves. I was always keeping myself busy. I definitely didn't have any particular problems. They supported us really well. I was never really afraid of anything. I was never worried about anything, not even finances. A lot of people tend to worry about finances a lot in uni, but like you don't really need to, especially if you've got a little bit of money saved up and you're sort of relying on like a maintenance grant or like student loans or whatever. You don't have to worry about finance. Finance should be the last thing that you worry about. If you want to go to uni, just go to uni and do not stress too much about it. Then the first semester finished, Christmas happened. Then I came back in 2019 to start the second semester, which was okay, but then I realised I kind of needed somewhere to work. I needed a job so I could get a bit of money rolling in. And as it so happened, the job actually came to me. So I was just walking back home one day and somebody just handed me a card and said, "Hey, do you want a job?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And I didn't even ask what it was. I just took the card, phoned up the number on the card, and the next day I literally went in there. I didn't even know what it was, and they trained me for what it was. What it was a fundraising job. I went to this company in Norwich called Home Fundraising. They might be liquidated or administrated now, I'm not sure. But basically what it is we went to the headquarters to have training on how to basically go door to door to different estates and places in Norwich to try and sell what was it that we did? I can't even remember. We were basically trying to convince people to become monthly donors for the British Heart Foundation. So we'd knock on people's door, we'd say, "Hi, how are you? I'm Tyler, I'm from the British Heart Foundation." And we would try and convince people. We'd give them some statistics and we would try and convince them to become monthly donators. And that all sounds very wholesome, but the job itself was not particularly fun at all. Because not only was I having to rework all of my uni time around the job, but it just wasn't satisfying. I'm not a fan of going door to door to people, even if they were friendly. Most people were not friendly. That was the problem, right? Some people were already donors, which is really nice, but some people, when random strangers come up to your door, most people do not like it. And you know, I experienced that the hard way. They come up to you and they're like, some people are relatively polite about it. They say like, "No thanks, sorry." But some people were quite rude. They were like, they closed the door. I turned around and one guy actually reopened the door and was like, "Is this a joke? Like, come on, my kids." It was like 8 o'clock, by the way. And he was like, "Oh, come on, my kids are like, they've gone to bed now." And just being a bit like moody about it. There's no need for it really. It just made the job so much worse. The conditions that we would go out in, it was like a 5-hour shift each night. So we'd leave at like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we'd leave at like 4 and then we'd come home at like 9, or either that or it would be like 6 to 10 or something like that. It was not particularly fun, especially considering we were going to places that we didn't have any familiarity with. The weather was not often that great. It was raining, it was cold. I was with people that I didn't really get on with because I didn't know them very well, so it was kind of awkward. It was also it was early on during the year, so it was dark. By the time it was like 4 or 5 o'clock, it was already really dark, and it was just kind of, it's not fun walking around an area that you've never been to in the pitch black. And like, there's lights about, there's street lights, but it's still really unsatisfying. So unfortunately, as a result of this particular job that I had, I remember one night I came home, I was just really upset, and I ended up having a mental breakdown in front of one of my flatmates, which was probably the worst experience I've ever had, and it was really freaky for me as well, because that's never happened to me before. Even throughout the whole of my like secondary school years, throughout sixth form, I never had any real stress, I never had any real worries, but then for the first time, I had so much weight on my shoulders from all the stuff that had happened at the beginning of the year. Even though I enjoyed a lot of it, there was still a lot of stuff that sort of kind of worried me, like for the future. I was very anxious about the future and about certain things that would happen. I really hated the job. It was really weighing me down. It was really unfair to have to do all of that, and it was my own fault as well. That was the most frustrating part. I was the one that went ahead and phoned them up. I was the one that signed myself up for the job because I had no idea what I was getting into. I was the one that needed the money, and I was sort of in a position where I was quite desperate, and I was quite upset towards the end of that, to the point where sometimes I would go to bed and just have loads of alcohol, which was really not a fun position to be in. I was just constantly like, I would go to bed and I would just drink like a couple of bottles of cider before going to bed, which is really, and then I would wake up the next morning and I would be ill, and that's not a point that anybody should ever have to reach, and that was not a place I would ever think I would even be in. I'm not that kind of person. I'm not an alcoholic, and I would never ever want anybody else to fall into a similar position where they get so upset they have to resort to alcoholism. It's not a fun position to be in. So a couple of weeks of that went by, and that was probably my most depressing point during the whole of uni, even third year with COVID, which I'm going to get to. That was a pretty depressing point, but eventually I sucked it all up and I said to myself, I'm not going to do this anymore. So I phoned them up. I said, I don't want to do this anymore. This is interfering with my uni life. I didn't come here to kind of ignore. Basically, the whole thing that I called them up about was, I said I was sort of ignoring my uni life. Right, I didn't come here to forget about all the stuff that I did at uni. I just wanted to focus on uni. I didn't want the job anymore. I didn't need it, and I told them that. I immediately went down to them, went into the headquarters, handed all my stuff in, and I left. And for the first time in a while, even though I was unemployed and even though that I was out of a job, I actually breathed a massive sigh of relief, and I'd lost a lot of the weight that was on my shoulders. I was really happy, and that was a much better position to be in. And as it turns out, things later on would definitely get a lot better as well. So a few months would pass, and they started opening up roles for people to work at the uni. So in the uni, a large chunk of what runs at the uni is governed by students. There's a big student body called a student union. UEA has it, Cambridge has it as well. I imagine a ton of different universities have the same sort of functionality. So, for example, the students will run the cafe in the main area, called the Hive, by the way. It's run by the students. The bar is run by the students. The kitchens were run by the students. And there was, several different services that were all run by the students. And you can tell because they've got the same student logo. It says UEA SU on it. It's at UEA's student union, right? And I thought, well, I've worked in kitchens before. Why don't I try and sign up to be a chef? Why don't I try and sign up to be someone that works in the bar kitchen? So I read the job description, had the interview. I was pretty much guaranteed to get it because they said I was the only one that actually had any kitchen experience. So I got the job, and basically what it was just making the sort of food that you expect to get in a bar. So things like garlic bread, chicken wings, chips, burgers, pizzas. The pizzas was easily the best part. Wraps, things like that, and it was all really easy to make. A lot of it was sort of pre-done, but there was a lot of hygiene involved, there was a lot of prepping involved. Obviously there was the washing up, that's always fun. But like the fact that I was working with students, the fact that the pay was good, and the best part was the hours were extremely flexible. You could actually sort of select when it was you wanted to work. It was a 0-hour contract, which means you are not obliged to work at all during the week, and they are not obliged to give you any hours during the week. You can literally pick and choose when you want your hours, and I'm pretty sure at the time it was a maximum of 15 hours per week, which for some places it's amazing because it's usually a minimum of 15 hours per week when you're working. But for this particular place in the uni, and for most of the student union, it was a maximum of 15 hours per week. You weren't allowed to go above that, and you could also swap your shifts with students using the website. You could split your shifts, you could just refuse shifts as well if that was allowed, and sometimes your shifts would get cancelled because of events or because of a lack of events. And that was probably like the best thing to happen, especially after the last job that I had. It was easily the best thing that had happened at the time. And then that was a lot better. Things definitely started to get better at that point during first year. The work was still well balanced, everything was okay. But then something happened a bit later on in the year, which was also a bit sad. And this is the part of the video that started to get a little more depressing. So later on in the year, unfortunately, I found out that one of my I say he wasn't really a close friend, but he was someone that I knew, that I went out with a few times. He seemed like a genuinely nice guy. I learned that he had committed suicide whilst he was at uni, which was a horrible thing to have to hear, because it's one of those things that feels almost alien to have to hear, because it doesn't feel like it should be happening at all. It shouldn't happen at all, and it definitely feels really weird when it happens to you, essentially. It feels okay when you hear about it on the news, you hear it happen to other people, and it's obviously really sad. But when it happens to someone who's close to you, it feels really strange. It really freaks you out because it doesn't really feel realistic until it happens to you. It's a horrible, horrible feeling, and it was very strange. And knowing that he was like genuinely not there anymore, and knowing that we would never see him because he was genuinely gone, it's horrible. You might think, you can argue that it's the same as if he left and went to a different uni and you just happened to never see him again. But no, it's still really sad because it just shows that we weren't there enough for him. We could have. I wished I could have done that much more for him, just to make sure he was okay. And that's something I want to point out to people. Quick little PSA. Just make sure you check on your friends and your family, basically. Even if you don't talk to them much, please just make sure that even the people in your life that seem the happiest could just be putting on a massive facade. Please make sure that everybody around you is okay. Please make sure that everybody is sort of not, they don't have to be in their best spirits, but if something is wrong, you need to be able to help them. You need to be able to sort of kind of guide them and point them in the right direction. Otherwise, they might suffer so much and they might take their lives. You might be too late, and that's horrible. And no one should ever have to go through that. No one should ever have to experience that. So yeah. Then towards the end of the year, things started to wrap up with exams. So there was an exam per module. The exams, the way they were done was different to how they've ever been done before, in my life. If you finished the exam early on, you could actually just get up and leave. I did that a couple of times with my exams, that I finished, that I did all the questions, read everything over, and I thought I can just go, and I did. I got one of the invigilators to take my paper, and I just left. So yeah, that was pretty good. The exams were fine. The maths exam was pretty horrible, but in general everything was okay. So first year was good, but that basically concludes everything that happened in first year. As I said, it was easily the most enjoyable year. It was a great experience getting to know everybody and sort of getting involved with uni. It's an amazing lifestyle. It's more than just education, it's more than just academics. Uni is a lifestyle. Uni is an amazing thing to be a part of, and as I said before, if you're worrying about finances, don't. Just do it. It's a once in a lifetime experience. Get involved with uni, do the things that you want to do, come out at the end of it with a degree, and honestly, things will just be so much better for you. Even if you have debt to pay off at the end, it really doesn't matter that much. You'll pay it off eventually and it will be okay. With the degree that you get, you can easily sort of worm your way into more favourable positions with companies, so it's really not that much to worry about. If I really had to suggest some stuff for UEA to sort of work on for first year, I'd probably say, well, with my module in particular, because there was some stuff that we complained about towards the end of the year, I would probably say things like a little bit more stuff about JavaScript, because we worked on HTML, we covered the basics with that was great. We did the same thing with CSS, that was fine. But then when we did JavaScript, they only really covered the very basics. They didn't cover like JavaScript in as much detail as I think they should have. So they said, here's a function, here's an object, here's an array. That's basically it, and like they didn't really cover as much as they should have, because like I'm going to go into this in a different video, probably the next one, but JavaScript as a language is massive, and they basically scratched the surface, which is kind of unfair, because not only does going through it more help you in terms of industry, learning about frameworks like Node.js, React, Angular and Vue. We did none of those. We just did raw JavaScript. We didn't even do jQuery. We didn't do any kind of like Ajax. We didn't do JSON. We didn't do anything like that. It was just raw JavaScript, and they could have definitely done a little bit more in terms of that, because JavaScript is massive nowadays. So I think they could have probably worked on that a little bit more. And yeah, I would have said to sort of point people in the right direction, probably look at more practical use cases in the programs that we were writing. So it's great that when you can write functions that can do things like sorts and searches, maybe even hash functions, and then people say, right, well, where does this actually get used in the real world? And they say they don't really have a solid answer, because that's the link that's missing when it comes to teaching computer science students. We learn about all these sorts of all these abilities to manipulate code in different ways. We're told that they can be used for things like AI, for database design, for web development, for security, but we're never actually told how it's implemented. We're never told a real practical use case for the functions that we write every day. So that's something I definitely recommend. If they ever watch this video, I recommend them, taking a look at least a little bit, because it would be extremely useful for them to do so. So that pretty much wraps up the entirety of first year. Now begins second year. Now second year was very interesting. Why? Second year was weird for a start. Second year was a slow downward spiral, is all I can say. It started off okay, started off pretty good, not as good as first year, but then it slowly started to get worse as the year sort of progressed, and it didn't even feel like a full year, which I'm going to get to in a minute. So I'm going to start by saying like what happened in terms of housing. So obviously when you finish your first year of uni, you have to move out of the accommodation unless you are exempt, and it's very unlikely that you'll be exempt as well, so you most likely have to move out with your friends. Originally I was going to move out with one of my flatmates, but he sort of pulled out at the last minute, which was very frustrating, and then he sort of came back in again, so it never really needed to happen. But basically what happened was I ended up moving in with a group of 4 people, 2 guys and 2 girls, who needed a 5th member because they kicked their previous 5th member out because he wasn't very nice. I moved in with them and got an opportunity to know them. One of them was also a computer science student who I ended up working with both that year and the next year, which was great. Now, in terms of modules with second year, the difference between first year and second year is with first year, you don't pick anything, but in second year, you get the opportunity to pick some of your modules. Because I did computer systems engineering rather than computer science, I was forced to do certain modules, and I was forced to pick other modules, which was okay. I didn't mind that too much. So, the 2 year-long modules that we had to do was Programming 2, which involved C, C++, and Advanced Java, which was really fun to do. And also the other one was Data Structures and Algorithms, so covering all the concepts of sorting, searching, graphs, and loads of different things to do with literally those 2 things, data structures and then algorithms, that all computer scientists basically need to know. The 2 first semester modules were Analog and Digital Electronics, which involved sort of logic gates, building things like traffic light systems, and then building an actual like analog circuit circuit with some speakers and stuff, which I'll get into in a minute. And then architectures and operating systems, which focused on the very low level of computers and involved assembly language like ARM v7, a little bit of the Linux shell, a little bit of bash scripting. The 2 second semester modules were embedded systems, which involved some very low level C programming using the STM32 board, and networks, which involved obviously studying the concept of networks, the way data is transmitted. But in terms of languages, it involved a little bit of Java, a little bit of MATLAB, which is probably the worst language in existence, a little bit of Linux, and a little bit of bash with some cron jobs. Yeah, so I will admit I very much enjoyed programming too. I mean, C in general was hard. Advanced Java was okay. I've never had a problem with Java. C++ was a little bit harder, but again it was okay. If you're used to Java, then you will definitely find C++ easy, or easier to get to grips with. The analog and digital electronics module, as I mentioned, was not a module that I had any choice in picking. Like some computer science students could choose A&D electronics, but I didn't have a choice because I did computer systems engineering. So the first half of A&D was the digital side, and that was focusing on things like logic gates, flip-flops, half and full adders, and basically those sorts of logic where you can build systems in that way, and then sort of abstracting those systems and connecting the sort of abstractions together. That was really good. The way that was taught was very well done. And then the coursework for that was building a very basic sort of traffic light system to control a sort of four-way, or sort of like a cross-shaped street where you had traffic lights on one side and traffic lights on the other bit. And that was really good, actually. That was very well done. Lots and lots of interesting and useful skills learned there. But the second half of it was very difficult. The second half of was the analog side. And the analog side basically focused on actual electronics like current, voltage, charge, all the basics of electronics, but in a lot greater detail. It focused on op amps and the process of amplification and like signals. And that was very difficult. Our one basically didn't work, and we didn't do very well. We still passed it because it was still built like relatively well, but it just didn't work, and that was a lot harder. So if you are someone who's looking to do A&D electronics in your second year, all I'm going to say is just be careful, because that module is quite tricky. Now, the 2 modules that I chose were the Architectures and Operating Systems module and the Embedded Systems module. Now, Architectures and Operating Systems was probably the most boring module out of the whole course, because the majority of people just didn't enjoy it, and it was very difficult to understand certain things with that module. It's very difficult to learn about things on the low level, right? It's very difficult to learn about assembly language and machine code and the way sort of architectures handle things, pipelining, all the different things that you have to get involved with the very low level. For us, that's very tricky to learn, in my opinion. The actual assembly language side of things was okay. Again, it's still very tricky. The coursework that we had to do for A&OS, the first coursework was it was using assembly language to take a string of text, encode it, so encrypt it, and then output the encrypted text, and then decrypt it using the same program, and then output the decrypted text. So it should output the same text as what you input, if that makes sense. Now that sounds like a really primitive program, and it is. You can literally write that in a few lines of Python or Java, but obviously writing it in assembly language is a bit trickier, and that's the main focus. It wasn't a focus on the actual program itself, it was a focus on manipulating all the registers and just getting an understanding of like the stack and all the very low level stuff of an architecture, of a computer architecture. So that was very useful to know as well. The second coursework for that module was basically building a very basic operating system, like a memory manager for an operating system, right? Which was in C, and that was horrible. We all struggled with that one. None of us had any real idea what we were doing, and we all just kind of resorted to loads of online forms like Stack Overflow and stuff like that, which just goes to show how tricky it was. And they did offer a lot of help with it, but that doesn't change how difficult it really was. So yeah, that wasn't particularly fun. There was also a little bit of bash programming, which was nice. So if you're not familiar with bash scripts, so in Linux, if you want to automate tasks or like stuff that you would normally run on the command line, if you want to do certain commands like several times over, you can just add those commands to a bash script. And you know, there's different variations of that, but that was really useful to know, and I believe a lot of companies find it useful if you understand the Linux shell along with the ability to script things automatically using bash. The other one that I got to choose was embedded systems, and that involved again more low-level programming. So you might be thinking, if you didn't like or if you didn't enjoy low-level programming, programming. Why did you do it, Tyler? Well, the reason why is because I didn't realise it would be that hard. I didn't realise it would be that tricky and it require that much sort of brain power, but it really does. Yeah, so as I said, with the embedded systems one, that was quite tricky. That was learning about things like pull up and pull down resistors. Again, just certain components that get involved with microelectronics. And with that, we used a microprocessor called the STM32X board, which is like this big green sort of rectangle with loads of... It's like a Raspberry Pi, but it has loads more capabilities. And it's really, really complicated to program. So much so that when we had a problem with it, when the lecturer came over, even he couldn't figure out the problem that we had with our code. Both the lecturer and one of the lab supervisors came over, and they could not fix our problem, which just goes to show how complicated and fiddly embedded C code can become. And that's what it was. When you get involved with C, a big chunk of C programming is programming stuff on the low level, which means like messing around with memory and stuff in the registers and in the cache, and it just becomes the biggest headache. That's like one of the worst things when it comes to programming. If you're good at low level stuff, I respect you, and I'm sure a lot of computer scientists do as well, because low level programming is a pain in the ass, to put it lightly. So yeah, I didn't enjoy that very much. We did okay. I think our course was like it was an automatic plant watering system where we basically had a plant and we stuck an STM board in there with a bunch of sensors and said, right, we're going to make it sense the water level in the dirt, and if it's too dry, we're going to just send a warning to somebody's phone that says, hey, you need to water your plant, so they can come along and water it. And that was basically it. So a very simple idea, but it was a big focus around sensors, the things that you can use to sense things in the real world, like temperature, humidity, light, fire, smoke, all sorts of things like that. Yes, if you are doing that module, that's a pretty big focus on it. You'll get more marks if you focus on sensors rather than just the board itself. You'll also get marks if you use the touchscreen, which is a lot of fun, to be fair. Yeah, the networks module was also okay. That was fun. That was really satisfying as well, because we got to make a really primitive version of Skype using Java. I realise people don't really use Skype these days, so I guess I should just say Discord. It was a really, really primitive version of Discord where you could connect two computers together, connect some headphones up, and just talk to people on both sides. That seems so simple, but when you actually make that in Java, or when you actually make that as part of the coursework, and you actually implement some form of security as well, so other people can't listen in, that's really satisfying. That was a really enjoyable first piece of coursework to do for that module. So, I really enjoyed that. The second piece of coursework for that in particular was not very enjoyable. It was basically just sort of choosing a bunch of websites and then monitoring them using different really basic commands like ping and traceroute and all those sorts of stuff, using and then sort of monitoring them using cron jobs, which is not very interesting. It's one of those skills that you need as a programmer, especially if you're someone that's going to monitor certain things. I'm just going to drink my tea. It's one of those skills that you need as a programmer, very importantly, especially if you're going to be working with the Linux terminal quite a lot. So there's that. In terms of the exams as well, that was because of COVID, the only exams that we had were architectures and operating systems and embedded systems, and all the other exams were cancelled. They're all just coursework based, which was okay, didn't mind that at all. So one thing I forgot to mention was that at the beginning, in February of first year, we got involved with something called Do Something Different Week, where I had the opportunity to do a number of different things, including DJ, including go to the Aviva headquarters in Norwich just to see how their company operated, which was quite useful. But most importantly, I got involved with a new society called the Music Recording and Production Society, or MRPS. Because they were obviously a group of producers or just people that had enthusiasts with guitars and singing and recording stuff. They didn't know how to produce, they didn't know how to get their stuff onto computers or just process it, mix it, master it, get it out there. This is what the society was for, and I thought this is perfect for me. With the music that I did in sixth form and the fact that I did music tech and the fact that I've always had an interest in creating music, I thought this was the perfect society to get involved with. So I did. And then come second year at the beginning, I became a society member, so as in I became sort of like one of the staff members, if you like. I became the health and safety officer, which is a terrible role to have, especially for something like that, where the only real role of the health and safety officer is if you go on a trip somewhere outside the uni, you just have to fill in a form that says what the possible risks will be, and you have to submit that form to some staff members. That never happened with me, so my role was basically just do nothing. But the best part about my role was that I actually got to teach people in the society, in the club, how to basically help them how to produce and how to organize their projects, how to synthesize, which was so much fun to do. So yeah, that was really enjoyable. Definitely helped keep me involved with the whole music production side of things. And I've not talked much about the music because I didn't want to talk about the music in this video, but obviously the music production whilst I was at uni just skyrocketed. So this was also, in second year, was also once I joined the society, it also gave me an opportunity to use the studio again. So this is the first time in like a year or so that I got to use Logic Pro, which is what I used when I was in sixth form, and that was so satisfying to be able to go into the studio and use the massive speakers, the MacBook, all the tech that they had, the Sapphire, all that sort of stuff. It was just amazing to be able to use that again. So perks of being in a society. March came along, and with it massive warnings about COVID and travel restrictions and things like that. So as soon as late March came along, just before my birthday, we had a little bit of a birthday due because I made sure it was early because I knew COVID was coming and I wanted to make sure everybody could be there. So we did that at uni. That was amazing. And then me and my brother, we packed our stuff up and we went home, and I stayed at home for literally the rest of the second semester, did my exams at home online, and I was at home all the way until September third year, which was pretty awful really. And it just meant that like we were still paying rent on the house as well. We weren't allowed to stop paying rent on the house, which was like £440 a month, not even including bills, and bills were pretty pricey as well. So in terms of like finances, in terms of money, that was pretty bad. That was a bit of a strike at my wallet. So yeah, but it's okay, we got through it, it was okay. In terms of what second year could have done better, I think there's only one real improvement I can mention about my course, and that's in terms of the embedded systems course. I kind of wish that they'd done less specific knowledge and more generalized knowledge. So the only device that we covered was the STM32, right? And that's a very specific device to cover. Not a lot of companies and not a lot of people are going to want that specific device. It would have been a lot better if they covered more devices such as the Arduino or the Raspberry Pi, and just sort of kind of use all three of those, or like a mixture of stuff with those, because that would have been a lot more useful, and people would have really enjoyed learning the Arduino. It would have been a much better approach than jumping in with the STM board. So yeah, that basically sums up second year. And now September 2020 comes along, and with it the beginning of third year. Now third year of uni in general was quite disappointing. In general, it was very it just wasn't very engaging, it was very boring, it was very dissatisfying, and the reason why was because of one thing that everybody knows, and that's COVID. Because of COVID, we couldn't go to lab sessions, all of our lectures were online, all of our lab sessions were online. A lot of the stuff that happened at the uni was sort of shut down, so we couldn't really go out. There was no clubbing. We didn't do any clubbing for the whole of third year. We went to the bar like 3 or 4 times to meet up, and even that was heavily restricted. I was still working in the kitchen at this time, and by this time I'd had so much experience in the uni kitchens from first and second year that I had become what is essentially considered senior staff, which just means like you're working there for like at least a year, something along those lines. But then when third year happened, the way the kitchen operated was very different. Instead of the customers coming to you to take the food, which made life a lot easier, we had to go out and take the food to the customers, which was something that I never signed up for initially. It was just a bit frustrating. It really got in the way of the way the systems was done. But third year was good because we actually got to choose all of our modules, which was really good. So third year, obviously with third year, it means you have to choose your third year project, which is worth double the amount of credits compared to all of the other modules that exist. So my third year project, I'm going to go into detail in a little bit, but I'm just going to say my third year project was basically a Java game that involved some artificial intelligence. The first 2 semester modules were artificial intelligence, which was mostly Python, and audio-visual processing, which was mostly MATLAB with a little bit of the Linux shell involved. And then the 2 second semester modules were developing secure software, which is basically cybersecurity, involved a lot of Python and web development related stuff, and ubiquitous computing, which involved a lot of Python, as well as a little bit of Android development in Java, and also the Arduino, which again I'm going to get into in a minute. So my third year project. So if you're a computer science student and you get to third year, you have to choose a project from a list of given stuff that all the supervisors give out. Then what you do is you figure out what it is you want to do with that project, you tell your supervisor, and if they accept it, you can start working on your project. So my project was basically, I wanted to build the board game, the famous board game Reversi or Othello, in Java, even though it was suggested that I do it in C++, but I don't really know C++. And also to add not only loads of like useful functionality, but also to implement some different artificial intelligence algorithms, so you could play against different players of different difficulties. So for example, an easy AI, a medium AI, a hard AI, a very hard AI, and also have those AIs compete against each other and against other existing artificial intelligences in different versions of Reversi that other people have made, and just sort of do some tests and comment on them. So that was my project, which was quite satisfying. So basically, to wrap it up, I created Reversi in Java. I used the Swing library to do the graphics, and then I had to involve a bunch of different artificial intelligence algorithms. So I obviously had the ability to play against another player, very easy to do. And then as an easy algorithm, I just basically made a random AI which just chooses a completely random move on the board. The medium AI was something called a greedy algorithm, which picks whichever of the next move like causes it to flip the most tiles on the board of your color. If you understand Reversi, you'll know what I mean. If not, don't worry about it. The hard AI was the famous minimax AI, which basically chooses the best possible outcome after maximizing and minimizing different moves along the tree. So it kind of looks ahead really, really far, but it's a very expensive algorithm. And then the very hard algorithm that I chose was something that hasn't been used very much and was suggested to me by my supervisor, which was the Monte Carlo tree search, implemented as an artificial intelligence to be used against the player, which was basically performing a variety of simulations along the tree and then choosing the most probabilistic outcome of those simulations, and then choosing that move. And that's the one that I would go with. And I compared it against the Minimax, and it was actually better against Minimax, which is rare. Minimax is usually like the cornerstone of AI that's used in games. It's really easy to add, and it usually does very well, but for some reason the way I implemented my Monte Carlo tree search algorithm was actually stronger than Minimax, which was something that I wanted to explore further. So I tested it against other games. Some games it did very well against, and some games it didn't quite do so well. But no, that was it was quite interesting. I did pretty well with it. The artificial intelligence module was very hard. The first half of it was basically looking at just the core concepts of AI and like programming in terms of AI, stuff like that. And it was just a hard module. I don't want to go into too much detail, but it was very tricky. If you're planning to choose artificial intelligence, be prepared, because it is a hard module. Audiovisual was actually a really interesting module. So what it involved was basically the concept of machine learning with speech and with lip reading. So the first course was making a system that could recognize what it was you were saying, so almost like Siri, for example. Very windy in this garden. And then the second course up was the same thing, but using lip reading as well. So it was sort of the system would be able to look at your lips, and every time you would move your lips, it would detect what it was you were saying. And ours didn't work very well, but that the implementation was very solid, and we got very good marks for it in the end. So, and it was quite enjoyable to do as well, the whole learning about how machine learning and like that sort of thing is typically done. It was a very good first basis into that sort of thing. A big chunk of third year was basically just machine learning. So I did say artificial intelligence was hard, but I didn't mention the coursework. So the actual the final bit of coursework we had to do, which was worth 80%, was a chatbot, which basically allowed you to book train tickets using the Greater Anglia web service. So it was basically in browser. It was a little message box that says, "Hi, how can I help you today?" You would say something like, "Hello, I want to book some train tickets," and it would go through all the information with you. That was all done purely in Python with a variety of different classes, and obviously using like HTML, a bit of CSS, a bit of JavaScript as well, and that was using Flask and Socket.io and a variety of different libraries. I had to learn, so it was in a group, it was 3 of us. I had to learn a rarely used library in Python called Experta, which is a knowledge-based library. So every time you say something, it has the ability to remember what it is you've said and can start to infer things. So for example, if you say, "I want to book some tickets on Saturday the 8th of December at 11 o'clock, it can infer all of those things. It doesn't need to ask you those things again. So that was really useful to do, and there was a bunch of stuff involved with that which was very complicated, but it was a really good end project, and we did very well for it as well. So I even got to make a video which I gave to the lecture organizer, and they really liked it. We got full marks for it, so perks of being a YouTuber, I guess. Then the second semester, Cybersecurity was really good. Again, very important to learn about the concepts of things like cross-site scripting, SQL injection, cross-site request forgery, all the different things involved with hacking. And we didn't actually get to do any hacking. We did get to use some viruses in a virtual box, which was really fun. But that involved a lot of Python. This is why Python is such an amazing language, because it's just very versatile. And the final coursework for that was making a website, a really basic blog site, but the whole point of it was it had to be as secure as possible. So we basically made our website really, really defensive and really strong. We got given somebody else's website and we had to break it using our known penetration techniques. That also involved again a little bit of web dev, so HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Flask, etc. A little bit of Bootstrap as well. Bootstrap's always useful to know if you're a designer. Ubiquitous was another module which I didn't really enjoy that much. That was very heavily involved with machine learning. It was very similar to embedded systems as well, but it was more involved with systems that sort of pick stuff up from the environment using sensors, but then they learn things from the environment and they're able to produce specific outcomes. So for example, you could using the ubiquitous systems, your coursework could be, this is just an example, but this will give you an idea of what the module is like. Your coursework could be like, our embedded systems coursework was the plant watering system. All it does is it monitors your plant and tells you if your plant needs watering, right? But to improve on that, for ubiquitous systems or ubiquitous computing coursework, you could have a system that every day monitors how much it rains, and then using various machine learning techniques can basically tell you, or it can basically predict if it's likely to rain the next day. And that's kind of what it was all about. Say, like, you get a notification on your phone, oh, there's a 50% chance it's going to rain today based on the predictive models, so it's likely that you want to water your plants tonight or whatever, something along those lines. And that was okay. It was a big portfolio of Python related stuff, machine learning. It was quite tricky, but it was okay. If I really had to say something, I wouldn't recommend that module in particular, but it was okay. Yeah, in general, the year was pretty miserable. It really sucked seeing the attitudes that everybody had. So I was with two other people that were both from the MRPS Society. The flat wasn't particularly great. It was $400 a month, not including bills, and it was a particularly poor flat to begin with. Very a lot of mold problems, very humid, just not a great place to be. It was a little bit further away from the uni. It was about a 20-minute walk. But I kept it as clean as I could. I sort of maintained it well. The other two didn't really do a great job in terms of maintaining it, but no, it is what it is. One of them was also particularly miserable during the beginning of the year because of COVID and just because of how things were. I could completely understand where he was coming from. So he ended up going home for a bit, which cheered him up a little bit. I stayed in the flat until Christmas. And then after Christmas, I didn't go back to the flat until like May. It took me like ages until I actually went back. I just stayed at home because it was more financially stable for me. It was just better for me financially to just stay home. So I did. And then came back to the flat in May so I could see people and sort of tie up a few loose ends, which was good. Had all the final projects. There were no exams. The whole year was just purely coursework. But we did have a final project presentation at the end, which was, again, it was online, which did actually take a lot of the stress away. Once everything was out the way, just sort of met up with a few people for a few drinks, and met up with one or two people for coffees as well, again, to wrap the end of the year up. And that was basically it. I came home and here I am now trying to figure out what it is I'm going to do. I've just been applying to a lot of developer roles like remotely as of yet, so hopefully we'll get something, but we'll wait. If I had to suggest any improvements with the course during third year, it would have to go towards the audio-visual side of things, because as I said, with audio-visual, the whole thing was using MATLAB, right? MATLAB, if you're not a programmer, MATLAB is a horrible language to have to use and learn. They did give us some sheets as to the sort of functions and stuff that we would use with MATLAB, but they never actually taught us how to use MATLAB, and it would have been really useful just to have some basic sheets or even a cheat sheet just to use MATLAB from the very beginning, because MATLAB, nobody knew how to use MATLAB at the beginning. So for my own benefit, I went out of my way to learn all the basics of MATLAB, basic programmer concepts like variables, functions, conditions, iterations, all the sort of stuff you would need to know in any language. In MATLAB, it's a pain because the syntax is actually horrible. It doesn't match any other syntax you've ever seen. I'm going to mention more of this in the next video, which is going to be me talking about different programming languages. But yeah, just in general, it would have been nice if they sort of they didn't have to teach us from the ground up, because I know they were very constrained with time. But if they at least provided us with some more references and more sort of sheets on how to use MATLAB properly, that would have helped people so much. That would have saved them so much time, and might even give them more of an influence to use MATLAB, although I somehow doubt it. And yeah, that basically wraps up my experience at uni. I came out of uni like much more social, much better as a person, with so many amazing and some particularly bad experiences, mainly like in the clubs. But in general, my whole uni experience has been absolutely fantastic. There's a few things I would say at the end just to conclude. If you're someone that's about to go to uni, I'm just going to give a bit of advice. First of all, uni is not really for everybody, but that doesn't mean like everybody can't go to uni, you know. Uni will give you some amazing experiences, and I'm always going to recommend uni. It's such an amazing experience to have in your life, and to be able to come out at the end of it with a degree is just fantastic, to be honest. As I said at the beginning and during the middle, you really don't need to worry about the financial side of things, because a lot of people just tend to, and a lot of things, I don't want to go to uni because I don't want to spend the rest of my life in debt. If you have a mindset like that, then you're going to be worrying about things just too much. This is the one life you're going to live. You just got to go for it. So that's what I did. I came out with my degree. Hopefully I'll be able to get a job and be able to climb a little bit higher. There'll be more doors open for me, and I know in the future I'm going to be able to pay off that debt. I'm not worried about it at all. There's no reason to worry about it at this stage. So, you know, I just wouldn't. People get nervous about them settling in, and that's expected, but you will settle into uni much quicker and much easier than you think. As long as you speak to people, as long as you get to know people, you don't shy away from the people in your flat, you know, you don't move away from them, you don't sort of kind of not talk to them. Make sure you talk to and interact with as many people as you can that you're involved with, especially the people that you're living with, because these are the people that you're going to be seeing almost every day. It's really useful if you at least try to get to know them. If they shy away from you, that's fine. There's nothing you can do about that. You can't force them out of their shell. But as long as you sort of present yourself as someone who's particularly friendly and approachable, then that's all you really need to worry about. It's also really useful to make friends with people that are on your course, because obviously if you're someone that does computer science, you'll be working with people, and you will need to be able to work and collaborate with people in order to get the work done. I would have not survived uni this year if it wasn't for the help of the people that I worked with, right? I did sort of face an issue with collusion during the beginning of third year with one of our courseworks, but honestly, when it comes down to it, in the real world, you will always be working with a team. You will need to be able to socialize and work with not just customers, but with your teammates and your fellow developers, whoever it is you're working with. You must be able to make friends with the people around you. Otherwise, if you're stuck on your own, you're going to suffer. You're going to have a really hard time trying to work and, you know, get things done properly. So just make sure you meet as many people as you can, and just approach people in a nice sort of typical friendly manner. So that's all I'm going to say with that. You know, make sure you explore all the societies and all the clubs that are available. If you're someone who's interested in sports, there will always be something sporty related, and there will always be football, there'll always be rugby, there'll be cricket, there'll be tennis, there might even be, I don't know, loads of other stuff like soccer. I don't know, there'll be loads of interesting stuff available for you at your uni. Even if it's not a particularly sporty one, it'll be there. There's also loads of weird societies. Like our one had a wine and cheese society. That was a bit of a joke, but that's the reason why it got popularity, because people thought it was kind of funny. If there isn't a society that you want to join, or if you think there needs to be one that exists, say for example a crypto society, make one. Be the person that starts a society and try and get people on board, because that could be a really interesting experience, and that's something else to put on your CV as well. And all I'll say is, just to kind of wrap everything up, is that all the good experience that you will have at uni, especially in my case, they will outweigh the bad experiences. There will be bad experiences that you have at uni, but they will always be outweighed by the good and enjoyable experiences that you have, so long as you make sure you put in the time and the effort that you need in order to get that degree at the very end. So uni is just an incredible experience, and it has been an absolutely unforgettable experience for me. So I hope everybody has the same sort of experience if you do decide to go to uni. And yeah, as I will say, I will recommend UEA for computer science, because they are a fantastic uni for that sort of thing. There's plenty of faculties, plenty of facilities for the things that you need, things that you want to do. There will always be people to support you and to help you. And yeah, that's all I'm really going to say with that. So yeah, that pretty much sums up this video. So thanks everybody for watching, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.